Welcome and good evening, everyone. I'm Rosemary Farrow from ThinkTree Hub, International Professional Association for the whole of the wellbeing industry. And today I have with me Leyla Moudden. Hi, Leyla.
Hi, Rosemary. So sorry, my camera's not working today, but I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
There's a lovely picture of you on the slide anyway.
Yeah, let's pretend that's how I look right now.
So Leyla's put together this great webinar on a common problem which I think every single one of us has experienced, which is that awful, horrible bloating feeling sometimes after we've eaten, that we think, is there something we can do about it? And what Leyla is going to do tonight is to untangle the whole idea of bloating, so we may be able to deal with it once for all. And that's not just for us as well, because I'm sure quite a lot of our clients come to us, and I know I've heard people say how uncomfortable they can feel with bloating, and if we can do something that can help our clients as well, that's perfect. So Leyla, I am going to hand over to you. Any questions, please place them in the Q&A box and Leyla will answer them at the end.
So thank you for joining me, everybody. So my name is Leyla Moudden, and I'm also known as the gut therapist. I basically got into this field because I had an allergic baby, and I was told there was no solution for her problems of allergies and reactivity to foods. And thanks to my education and all of the things that we did, she's now a fully grown 10-year-old with no allergic responses or bloating or reactions to food at all. I'm the Director of Education for Enzyme Science and Enzymedica. I see clients personally for all sorts of issues, primarily digestive health and hormonal issues. A lot of females getting to perimenopause, menopause and things like that. I do something called metabolic coaching. And if you Google me, you'll probably find a lot of my articles online. So what is bloating? Bloating is when the stomach fills with air. And how we experience that can vary from person to person, but usually it's when the pants start to feel tight. There may be some pain, some cramping. It may seem unavoidable, or you may notice that it's related to a particular food or a drink, but generally it's the experience of waking up with one type of stomach, and then by the end of the day you have a different type of stomach, and it's not something that we have to accept. It's not something that we have to live with. And what I'm going to do is go through the underlying drivers and give you kind of like a tip list of things to do to untangle your specific bloating. So a frequent thing that I hear from clients is, I'm like super healthy, why am I bloating? Often they have really good diets, you know, they've tried everything they can think of. They might be having organic oats with nuts and seeds and berries for breakfast. They might have a lunch, a relatively decent lunch, and then something very healthy for dinner. So they're trying, and yet they're still bloating. So what is going on? And from experience, it's usually that they have a sensitivity to something that they may not have identified, usually because the thing they're sensitive to is a healthy food. So people don't tend to be suspicious of apples or pears or anything like that, but they can create bloating just as anything else can. They may have an issue with their digestive system, so some aspect of the digestion process is not working. Frequently it's chewing. A lot of people are not chewing, or they're moving when they're eating. And of course, as we get older, as we age, like everything else in our bodies, our digestive systems begin to struggle more and are not able to handle the kind of meals that we was able to handle in our 20s. And bloating is really a signal that something's going on with the digestive system. And so when you are experiencing something like bloating, it generally means that there's other things that are either going wrong already or will go wrong if the issue is not identified and resolved. So gut health 101. All disease begins in the gut. So the gut is the area from your mouth all the way through your digestive system through to the anus. And in that arena is 70% of our immune system, 90% of our feel-good hormone production. It has a huge role to play with our hormones. And so any disruption in this digestive tract will create a disruption elsewhere. So problem number one, the first and most important contributor to low stomach acid to bloating is having low stomach acid in the first place. So what happens is when we chew, we break down our meal into smaller molecules, and then we release enzymes. They begin the digestion process. Food travels through the stomach where carbohydrate digestion stops, and it goes over to more fats and proteins. Then that goes through into the small intestine, where the pancreas begins to secrete more enzymes to break down the carbohydrates and to begin the process of nutrient absorption. And then by the time it gets into the large intestine, really most of the hard work is done, and we're left with a bit of processing to do, usually by gut bacteria. So what happens is, when there is an issue with low stomach acid, we lose that initial part of protein digestion. So I'm going to explain what happens if we don't digest protein properly. And we also lose the sterilizing effect of stomach acid. So stomach acid is designed to kill everything that is bad for us. It's a critical part of protecting the rest of the body from bacteria, fungus, mold, and so on and so forth. So when there's low stomach acid, bacteria can slip into the gut, where it begins to ferment things, grow, multiply, and via that process release gas, which inflates the abdomen. And it also has a big role in what we absorb. So for anyone who is B12 deficient or anemic or whatever, it may be that the origin of their issue is low stomach acid. So what do we do about low stomach acid? So we can take something called digestive bitters. So if you go onto your favorite health food store and you write the words digestive bitters into the search, there's multiple formulas out there where you put a few drops on the tongue, and that stimulates the release of stomach acid. Any bitter flavor, such as apple cider vinegar, will help the production of stomach acid. Stomach acid is naturally produced when we're still and chewing and smelling food and thinking about food. So eating mindfully is a really good idea. Refined foods tend to have a negative effect on our stomach acid and digestive enzyme production. So refined foods would be any food that is ready to eat immediately out of the packet. So that would be your crisps, your bars, your fast foods and things like that. One common problem that I see all the time is that people don't leave a 5-hour gap between eating. So they may be in a rush. They might grab a bit of avocado on toast for breakfast, and then about 2 hours later they're hungry. In go with the nuts and seeds or crisps or whatever other snack, and there's this kind of snacking process that goes on. And what that snacking process does is it switches off a mechanism in the small intestine that clears the small intestine of any debris or residue from what you had previously swallowed. And when that mechanism is not allowed to work, bacteria can accumulate in the area and begin to produce gas and wind and bloating, and then we get inflation again. And then if none of those things are helping, then we could try taking a betaine HCl supplement when we eat, which is basically a stomach acid in a capsule. So by far the largest cause of bloating that I see is food intolerance, and intolerances are much more common than allergies. So what will typically happen is that an individual will notice that they're beginning to react to certain foods, begin to believe themselves to be allergic, go and have an allergy test and find out that they're not allergic to anything. Now, food intolerance is a digestive response. So food intolerance means when I eat this food, I get a negative consequence. So that negative consequence may be bloating, it may be migraine headaches, it might be eczema, it might be diarrhea, it might be constipation, it might be anything. It might even be emotional. It could be rage or anger. And the immune system has nothing to do with this reaction. So we can't say that it's an allergic reaction. And the underlying cause of it is an inability to digest certain foods, which I'm going to explain next. And the symptoms may vary. So with food intolerances, they can take up to 3 days to show. So you might go out, let's say on a Sunday evening, go out for a meal with friends, come home, feel absolutely fine. Monday, Tuesday, you're absolutely fine. And then on Wednesday, you may be eating something you're not intolerant to and notice that your stomach is much larger than it should be. You might notice swollen. A lot of people also use the words water retention, which is just another form of bloating. So how does it happen? So adverse reactions to foods can either be allergic reactions, which are mediated by the immune system. They can be mild, they can be severe, they can be life-threatening. And non-immune mediated reactions, which we call food intolerances, is 100% due to digestive enzymes. And the other reason for adverse reaction to foods that a lot of people miss is this word here, aflatoxins, which is mold. So if they're in a wet house, or if they're not leaving their dishes to dry properly. I had one lady, she investigated to see where the source of her mold was, and it was actually, she had mold in her juicer, just in one of the bits of her juicer. When she pulled it all apart, she found black mold in there. And so exposure to mold and those kinds of toxins will affect how you respond to foods, and why. So when we swallow food under a microscope, proteins are all bundled up like this. And then what hydrochloric acid does is it unravels the protein like this. So now we have what's called amino acid chains. And then enzymes, pepsin, are released to break down these chains into smaller molecules. And then those smaller molecules are absorbed via the small intestine into the bloodstream. So anything that your body needs protein for, such as heart, muscle, brain, most of our functions, our immune system is made up all of proteins. That process is sabotaged by low stomach acid and low digestive enzymes. And what happens is, if this process here doesn't happen, then we have a huge issue. We're introducing a huge problem into our stomach, the end result of which is bloating. So this is a kind of diagram of the effect of that. So this is an example of a cell that is on your on the lining of your intestine. And when we get a complete protein into the lining of the small intestine, we get intolerance or allergy. But when we have a fully broken down protein touch the lining of the stomach, we do not get an intolerance reaction or an allergy. And so how does this happen? So this is basically our digestive system unraveled. So in diagrams, you'll see a picture of a mouth here, the stomach here, you'll see like a squirrely intestines, and then a larger intestine, and then you'll see the colon. But if you rolled it out with like a rolling pin and put it in a straight line, this is what you would see. And the thing that I want everyone to kind of really focus on is the reference to enzymes. So here, for a successful digestive process to happen, we need salivary enzymes. Any word that ends in ase is probably an enzyme. We have stomach enzymes and hydrochloric acid. Then later on, we have a different collection of enzymes. Then through there, we have more enzymes. And then later on, we have bile salts, which are there to digest fats. And the result of that digestive process is that we get all of our critical nutrients absorbed into the body, because they've been broken down by enzymes into little molecules that can then go into the bloodstream and nourish us. So how do we fix this? Well, my favorite way of fixing this is to give, all of my clients are on digestive enzymes. So there's multiple digestive enzyme blends out there. This is, of course, my favorite. So how do you identify which enzyme is right for you? So keep a food diary. If you can keep a food diary, it doesn't have to be super, super detailed. You could just write oats with banana, breakfast, biscuit, snack, lunch, apple, or salad, or steak and chips if you're that kind of person. And as you log it alongside, on every day, Monday to Sunday, write down how your digestive system is feeling. And how do you assess your digestive system? You reference any changes in your bowel habits, you reference any changes in your stomach size, and you reference any experience of heartburn or anything that happens soon after you eat. Use the digestive bitters. Chew very well. So the absolute best healthy eating habit a person can have is chewing. If the situation is severe and you're bloating a lot of the time, consider a gut healing program. And usually, to resolve the problem permanently, depending on the severity, there is usually a short-term dietary adjustment. But in my experience, understanding which enzymes you need often solves the problem. The next contributor to bloating is an imbalance in our gut bacteria. So inside of our tummies, there lives billions and billions of bacteria. And when those bacteria eat, they release gas, and it's called fermentation. So if you've ever fermented anything, if you've ever had to go at making kombucha or anything like that, you'll notice that the jar that's holding the fermented product can crack. It will expand from the gas. The gas is being produced by the bacteria. Now, in a healthy microbiome, in a healthy population of gut bacteria, there are bacteria that eat the gas that is being produced, and there are bacteria that produce different types of gases, which can be measured on like a breath test or a stool test. So what can happen, and it can happen very quickly actually, it only takes one episode of extreme stress to throw your bacteria off balance. And if you have an unfriendly population of bacteria in your stomach, they will produce gas ongoing. And if the stomach acid and the enzyme part of your digestive system is not functioning well, then those incomplete food molecules will continue to grow those bad bacteria and continue to ferment, creating the air that leads to bloating. And how does this happen? So the stuff that we put into our bodies affect the response from our gut bacteria, which results in something called dysbiosis, which basically means that the balance of bacteria is more negative than positive, and then that leads to the experience of bloating. So what do we do? So the first thing to do when you want to untangle bloating is avoid anything that is processed, refined, or sugar-based, because bad bacteria and also fungus and other things that can grow in our tummies love refined sugars and carbohydrates. So we first of all need to cut off that food supply and stop them from continuously fermenting and producing gas. We can eat fermented foods, which are loaded with bacteria. So kimchi, pickled foods, kombucha, these are all full of good bacteria and will continuously work to rebalance your gut. Prebiotic foods are foods that feed the bacteria, and foods that feed the bacteria are usually fibers. So anything that is rich in fiber is really, really good for your gut. If the issue is severe, you may want to consider a short-term symptomatic relief diet, and of those FODMAP is the most famous. You must not do it for more than 6 weeks though, because you could then become deficient. Consider taking a probiotic supplement, so you could take something actively to attempt to rebalance that bacteria. And of course we need digestive enzymes, because if we allow incompletely digested molecules into the gut, all of the bacteria are going to immediately begin to start fermenting that incomplete food and just produce gas, more gas, and that's when you get the flatulence and the wind. So the next problem is constipation. So the longer stools stay in the colon, the more opportunity there is for bacteria to ferment. So we have a lot of gut bacteria that are in our colon. So what we want to do is we want to digest food well enough so that there are no complete foods left in our stool. But then if we're constipated, and my definition of constipation is a person who is going to the bathroom less than twice a day. Less than twice a day, definitely less than once a day, I would consider that a constipated person. And the longer the stool stays in the colon, the longer the fermentation goes on, the more gas is produced, and then we have bloating. And why does this happen? So these are kind of completely digested molecules, or let's say they're not completely digested molecules. They enter the colon without being digested, where they are fermented by gut bacteria, and that process of fermentation produces wind. Then if that's left unaddressed for a long time, what happens is that the wall of the colon stretches, and then that makes it even more difficult to pass a stool, because the stool will be larger because of the stretched out colon, and there will be gas being produced, which will inflate it more. And then you might find that you have the urge to go, but for some reason you can't put it. When you push, it's not happening. There are also some bacteria that release a gas called methane that actually paralyzes the muscle of your colon, and that can make it difficult to go as well. So once you're in this cycle of constipation, it can get worse and worse and worse, and a person may end up in a situation where they're reliant on laxatives or something else. They don't know what's going on, and usually the problem begins with not chewing, not having sufficient stomach acid, then not having sufficient digestive enzymes in the intestine, and then ending up with the latter stage problems of gas, wind, bloating, plus constipation. So constipation is something to really address if this is an issue for you. So what can we do about it? So fiber is only as effective as the water we consume it with. So you can take as much fiber as you like, but that fiber has to absorb water to have the bowel moving effect. And it's actually very difficult to eat the 30 grams of recommended amount of fiber per day. It's quite difficult. So be conscious about fiber and find kind of shortcuts to eat fiber. So my shortcut for fiber is I have like 4 I have 4 Rivitas a day, the dark brown one, and that's my daily fiber intake. But a lot of people are not touching fiber. And if you're constipated and dehydrated, fiber can actually make it worse. So some people may have tried fiber, not got the success that they were looking for, and then avoid it because they feel it makes their constipation worse. And that's actually a sign that the dysbiosis is quite severe. Magnesium. So magnesium citrate is a lovely natural muscle relaxant and absorber of water into the bowel. Linseed, any kind of seeds that absorb water are really nice, kind of what we call demulcents, things that kind of moisturize the colon and allow things to slip through more easily. And physical movement, moving the legs around, doing these kind of like Russian style dancing, squats, bicycling, those are all really good for moving the bowel as well. So of course we have to talk about diet. So what we need to remember is that the human body evolved over millions of years, and during that time they would have either, if they're animal eaters, they would have slaughtered their animals at certain times of the year, they would have harvested fresh food, they would have eaten seasonally, and most importantly their food would be devoid of the things that modern food is full of. So they would not be consuming fertilizers, pesticides, their foods would not be bleached, boiled, sprayed, and all of the other stuff that is utterly unavoidable in modern life. So it doesn't matter how committed you are to eating without all of those chemicals, inevitably at some stage you will be exposed. And we don't have digestive processes to handle all of that. So what can we do? So buying organic when it's possible. So it's not, you know, for some people it's very difficult to be 100% organic. So a rule of thumb is, if you have to choose what your organic foods will be and what your non-organic foods would be, I would say everything that grows above ground and attracts pests, such as strawberries and berries, should ideally be organic because they have the greatest level of exposure to pesticides. Whereas things that grow underneath the ground, such as potatoes, and things with a thick skin, such as bananas and watermelons, are less likely to have a high volume of pesticides in them. Increase the amount of complex carbohydrates you eat. So complex carbohydrates take a long time to digest. They're very cleansing to the body. Lean proteins, healthy fats such as your oils, olive oil, linseed oil, flaxseed oil. Focus on variety. Eat lots of different types of fruits and vegetables. So if you're a habitual person, or you always eat from the same place or shop from the same place, it can be tempting to always get the same thing. But the key to a healthy gut is variety. So try to rotate your fruits and vegetables. So if you have corn on a Monday, have pumpkin on a Tuesday, and then have broccoli on a Wednesday, and so on and so forth. So the key to success is rotation. Choose smart snacks. So a smart snack is protein plus carbohydrate plus fat. So an example of this is mashed avocado on a Rivita with a bit of olive oil. So you have your protein, your fruits, your vegetables, and your carbohydrates. Be conscious to water. So I often test my clients. So every single one of my clients will undergo some kind of testing, be it urine test or blood test or stool test. And every single one of them shows as being severely dehydrated, and every single one of them says they drink water all day long. So there's 2 elements to hydration. The first is the amount of water you're drinking, and the second is your sodium, potassium, calcium balance. So if you're thirsty and you're urinating a lot and you feel dehydrated, you have dry skin, your mouth feels dry, consider taking electrolytes. 5-hour gap between meals always, if you can, and avoid fatty diets. So what fatty diets do is that they change the speed and efficiency of your metabolism. So what typically happens is people go, right, I'm going to do this diet. They might last 3 to 7 days, and then they have a crash and they go on a binge because it's not customized for them. While they're undergoing that food restriction process, their digestive system slows down because the body believes itself to be in a famine. And then when they go back to normal eating, so not excessive eating, but normal eating, they start to gain weight. And there's a reason for that, and that's called metabolic balance. So again, bitters, always bitters to start your meals for digestion. Fermented foods, live yogurt, kimchi, kombucha, anything that is pickled. And then try to pair your foods with enzymes. So you can either take an enzyme supplement, or you can follow with an enzyme-rich fruit like papaya, pineapple, or kiwi, which are our enzyme-y foods. So if you are bloating, I would like for you to keep take an enzyme with every meal for 7 days. I would like you to keep a food diary, and I would like you to let me know how you get on. And if this doesn't work for you, we can find something that will. You can find me at www.thegutTherapist.co.uk, or you can Google enzymedica.co.uk for enzyme blends. And that is the end of my presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Leyla.
No problem. I hope that wasn't too fast.
It wasn't too fast. It was fascinating. Some really, really food for thought. Again, if you're listening and you've got some questions, just put them into the chat or Q&A. Either is absolutely fine. I'm just going to stop. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that struck me was certainly this idea of having a 5-hour gap, because you see so often quite advice to, just graze, or just some people do better having little snacks, and you're saying categorically don't do that.
Yes, and the reason for that is, and I think that's why intermittent fasting is such people feel so good on intermittent fasting. So if we look at the digestive system, the small intestine, where most of our absorption occurs, has this function called the migrating motor complex. And what the migrating motor complex is, it's like a little escalator. It's like a little escalator kind of starts moving to sweep away any debris from the small intestine. And it only switches on when there's been a period of fasting. So if you do not leave a 5-hour gap between meals, depending of course on your age, so I wouldn't say to children leave a 5-hour gap between meals. If you do not leave a 5-hour gap, then that process never switches on. So when you eat, you're kind of throwing more debris into the area, which makes an ideal environment for bacteria to take hold and begin to ferment things. So basically, if you're eating continuously throughout the day for no reason, I mean, some people, they might be diabetic or have blood sugar regulation issues, they may need to eat more frequently than the average person. You're basically preventing your migrating motor complex from taking an effect, and that is why people may go to bed with a bloat and wake up without a bloat, because that period of no eating through the night, their migrating motor complex has been able to clear away all of the debris, and there's nothing for the bacteria to ferment, and then there's no gas and bloating.
Excellent. That really, that's so clear. That is so clear. It's so clear. I absolutely never knew that. Do you know what also occurred to me in particular? We're talking about processed foods, and that's very much all those people who have switched to a vegan diet, because what I observe with the vegan foods is they are all almost, unless people are going to cook normal stuff from scratch with lentils, etc., they're buying highly processed foods.
Yes, so being healthy and being not healthy is really about eating foods as close to the source as possible. So an apple is an apple, apple puree is a step further, but an apple tart is a step further, and an apple crisp is a step further. So the further away you are from the point of origin, the less healthy it's likely to be, and the more disruption it's likely to cause. And what we see with all products really, so with some vegan products, like I think I once bought a vegan cheese and it had like 28 ingredients. So it's a very, very so whatever those ingredients are, it's very, very far from the source. Coconut oil is never meant to be a cheese. Rapeseed oil is never meant to be a cheese. So it's a very, very highly processed. And we see the same with the meat products. We see, for example, like hot dogs, burgers, they're very, very far away from the point of origin. So yes, it's very easy to fall into a bit of a hole, especially if you're a new vegan. It's very difficult to fall into that trap of believing, oh, because it's vegan, it's healthy, when actually the true statement is the less processed it is, the healthier it is. And if that's the guideline to follow. And it's very difficult to keep up with your nutrition in England if you're a vegan, because we don't have the all-round abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables as you would in other countries. So, you know, in a British winter, what's growing, you know, compared to you know, somewhere hotter and more tropical. So, you know, it is a bit of a challenge to be a healthy fresh food vegan, you know, in England.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to throw away my vegan cheese. I don't eat dairy products. That's kind of very sad, Leyla.
I know. I've been through the journey myself. Yeah.
The other thing, so digestive bitters.
Mm.
Now, is it easy just to find a recipe for them or to buy them from somewhere?
Yeah, I would get them as ready drops. So, you know, it's possible to, you know, it's possible to buy lots of different herbs and put them together and all of that. But the formulas that are on the market are so good, you know, and basically your tongue has taste receptors on them. And one of the taste receptors is for the bitter flavor.
Yes.
And when you put bitter flavor onto your tongue, all of your digestive system begins to secrete fluids and enzymes, preparing for digestion. So it's a really, really effective way. And actually, in a lot of cultures, they will be historically, traditionally, they will begin their meals with a bitter and they'll end their meals with a bitter. So, for example, you might have an amuse-bouche or a little bit of bitter salad with pomegranate, rocket leaves, citrus. You know, this is a bitter starter. And then you'll end with a coffee, which is another bitter. So we do have these habits that these traditional habits in many cultures, but in the modern life we've kind of lost these habits that are so good for our digestive systems.
Yeah, and I think I don't think there's ever been, I know UK wise, I don't think there's ever really been a tradition of having something bitter. You do say in places like Italy very much come across that. And in Europe, but in the UK, I don't think so.
No, so the UK has become a very processed environment. So it's very difficult to follow good habits, you know. So a lot of people have every intention of following good habits, but then they have time restrictions. They'll run into the supermarket and they'll just grab whatever they can, and they don't have the time and the space to think, what's my digestive bitter going to be? You know, how am I going to end this meal with a bitter? We don't really have the time and space to make these kinds of healthy decisions. And even if we wanted to, you have to look all over the supermarket to find these things. You know, they're not on the aisles in your face with adverts around them in the same way that the unhealthier things are. So we are a bit up against it, and it does take a bit of planning, have a continuous stock of certain things in your home. But my cheat is that I begin every meal with chopped cabbage, and onto the chopped cabbage I put olive oil and lemon, and that is my lovely bitter that I start every meal with. And it's taken time to get into that habit, you know.
I can imagine that. I can imagine that. But you know, I go into supermarkets and I've come to the conclusion that really, most aisles are devoid of food.
Yeah, because it's processed food lasts longer, so you can have a processed food on the shelf for up to 3 years. It's cheaper to produce and it has a much higher margin, so they'll make a lot more financial gain from selling, let's say, a packet of crisps than they will to sell one potato, which you could probably create 3 packets of crisps if you so chose to. So they don't have to worry about food degrading, going off, molding, you know. So economically it makes sense for supermarkets to sell, you know, processed and packaged foods. Time-wise, it makes sense for busy people to continue to consume those processed and packaged foods. But as far as health is concerned, that is not the way to go if long life and well-being is the goal.
How do you think we can communicate this to our clients who are running around how can we actually change the mindset? I mean, ignoring our own mindsets, but how can we actually change our clients' mindset to say, actually, start to look, in order to deal with bloating, start to look at the whole way you approach food, start with bitters, have this 5-hour gap. I mean, there's a very clear roadmap that you've presented, but how can we best communicate this to?
I find the most important thing, so clients are very, very defensive about food. Food is a deeply emotional thing. You know, we have business lunches, family dinners, Christmas, Valentine's, you know, food is like a deeply embedded emotional part of our lives, that we socialize with food, we're happy with food, we're sad with food, we watch movies with food. You know, it's a really, really intimate part of a person's life, and they don't like being told that they're doing something wrong, because a lot of the time they're not really doing anything wrong. It's just that their digestive system doesn't like it, whatever it is that they're doing. So what I tend to do is I take the responsibility away from the person, and it's important that they get a quick result. Yeah, so as soon as they get a quick result, they're willing to listen to more. And I always start with enzymes. So I say, take this enzyme with your meals and let me know how you feel in 7 days time. And 99% of the time there is an improvement. And I say, right, so the enzyme is addressing something. Let's have a look at what it's addressing. And then it's like, you know, trying, rather than getting rid of things, is introducing things. So let's have a target of 1 piece of fruit a day. Let's have it, depending on where they are, you know, let's have a target of switching from a dairy milk to a plant milk. You know, let's take it in steps. And usually once somebody stops bloating, you know, they're overjoyed and they're willing to do anything to stop it from coming back. And then they might do something naughty, like, you know, I know you told me not to eat gluten, and I had gluten and I've had a massive bloating episode. And then you give them coping strategies to balance that. So I think a lot of the time we fall into the mistake of telling our clients off. You know, naughty client, I told you not to have a packet of crisps. Naughty client, you know, when really it's about opening them up to another way, because their eating habits are things that they've acquired to either manage their life, or have a good time, or celebrate with friends, or entertain their clients. You know, so it's a very sensitive button that we're pressing when we talk to people about food. And I usually address their favorite thing last. So I say, you know, what's the one thing that you absolutely can't live without? I would say 65% of people say my morning coffee. I can give up everything except my morning coffee, or I can give up everything except my evening glass of wine. And it's like, okay, so you know, are you attached to your lunch? No, I'm not attached to my lunch. Okay, let's see if we can play around with lunch and see what happens. And you kind of pose it to them as an experiment that you're embarking on together to find out what is generating this reaction. But most of the time, enzymes will solve the issue most of the time.
So if you were recommending enzymes, are there a particular mix of enzymes, or where would we go and find them?
Yeah, so we basically want enzymes that do the job that our digestive system is trying to do. So we want a protease enzyme that breaks down proteins. We want to see amylase in the enzyme, and we want to see maltase. You can't put sucrase into an enzyme, so the other word for that is invertase and lactase. And if you have a enzyme product that has all of those in there, then you've pretty much got everything covered. Sometimes a person will have multiple food insensitivities, intolerances, and for them you want an intolerance focused enzyme. And other people know that they have an issue with large meals, so you want a lot of protease focused enzymes. But what you want to look for is balance. You know, you don't want just only one type of enzyme. You want to see that the company has put a lot of thought and consideration into their product, and that it's actually addressing a therapeutic goal. And that's why I love the Enzyme Medica and Enzyme Science products, because that's when you read the ingredients list and you look up what those particular enzymes do, you're like, oh my god, like they've really put their heart and soul into this blend. Whereas you can have other enzymes that are addressing only stomach or only intestine, you know, and they're kind of like different types.
Brilliant. The other thing you mentioned was sometimes dealing with probiotics, and I know if you go and search for probiotics online, there are a plethora of them. How do you actually decide which probiotic to go for?
So I would say the most significant thing about a probiotic is it going to get to the area that you want it to get to? So when we consider a lot of probiotic products, they would have been, the probiotic bacteria would have been harvested, they would have been freeze dried, they would have gone through some industrial machinery to be encapsulated. They would then go through other machinery to get into a carton or container of some kind. Then they would have had a plastic covering, heat attached to them, and then they would be shipped all over the world. And then we swallow them, and then they go into our stomach acid, which is so strong it can melt through metal.
Yeah.
And then we expect that bacteria to somehow get into our gut and start to reproduce, which for me is like it's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a leap of faith. Research now shows that if you are going to take a probiotic, the most effective probiotic that is most likely to succeed the process of manufacturing and digestion are spores. So if you're looking for a gut bacteria product, look for bacterial spores. And spores can survive nuclear war, they can survive an apocalypse, and what they do is that they come alive when the environment makes it possible, and that environment is our gut. So spores will survive absolutely everything, reach our gut, and then begin to reproduce. So one spore will go on to produce 100 more bacteria. Wow. So look for spores always.
How many companies are producing them, Leyla? Or
I would estimate there's about 4 or 5 companies.
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're relatively easy to find as long as you put the right search terms in.
Correct. So you want to look for bacteria, probiotic, spore, supplement.
Brilliant.
And there's clinical trials, they can recondition a gut in like 30 days.
Really?
Yeah, they're really, really good. Very, very exciting breakthrough in the microbiome world.
That is, because, yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. And the kind of last thing that I was thinking about very much was, you mentioned molds and aflatoxins and wet houses and even sort of juices. And again, so this is client education as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of the time, especially if a client is new to the wellness world and they're very non-specific about what could be possibly contributing to what their problem is, it's really important to take environment into consideration. And part of environment is, of course, stress levels, quality of their relationships. Is anything bothering them at the moment that will affect their digestion? And then we have industrial things. Do they live near a petrol station? Do they work at a petrol station? Are they frequently exposed to pollution? What kind of paint are they using? I had a lady, she had she was very young and she had fertility issues, and it turned out she was a painter, so she's exposed to all of those materials all day long. She's inhaling them, she's putting the brush between her teeth, and she's got it on her tongue and in her soft tissues. And people don't consider these things. And wood floors that are quite old, so if the wood floors are quite old, they become a reservoir of dust and fur and pollen and all sorts of things. So the environment is a tremendous contributor to immune dysregulation and digestive dysregulation. And if a person has consumed any form of mold, so they might have, let's say, a packet of cherry tomatoes in the fridge and 2 of them have got mold growing on them, they may pick out the 2 and chuck those and wash the rest. And it may be that there is some living mold on there. So if you on the remainder, because we can't see it. So a good food washing process is to put your veg fruits, and also there's just mold that just grows on plants, that we can't see, candida, fungus, all sorts of things. So if you soak your vegetables and fruits in a bowl of water with about 20 mils of apple cider vinegar and just let it lie there for about 10-15 minutes, then you would have appropriately killed any kind of nasty living things on there.
That is so useful. I actually have a little a bottle of veg and fruit wash.
Lovely. Yeah.
You can put
Yeah.
in things.
Yeah, because you've got all sorts of things living in on there, leaving their little eggs and their spores and things like that. So but with aflatoxins, it's usually black mold, and it's usually black mold exposure, and it could be growing underneath a bed or on the back of a desk or in the corner of a room, you know, in the corners of windows. And if you're continuously exposed to that, even at a small level, then that's going to cause all sorts of disruption. Yeah. So just to sum up, in order to beat the bloat, we not only have to mindfully eat, chew everything, start our meals with bitters, blast ourselves with enzymes. I'm going to say blast with enzymes. Up our amount of fibre that we eat significantly. Wash our fruit and veg, and really look at our environment. Fantastic. Fantastic. You can now untangle the bloat. Oh, brilliant. Look, Leyla, thank you so much. Sally says, thank you so much, Leyla and Rosemary. I really appreciate you doing these presentations. Always enjoy hearing the information. And she says it was good to see you both in Coventry. It was good to see you. Oh, thank you, Sally. Thank you. Lovely to see you. It's been such a long time. Yeah. Thank you so much. Anyway, Leyla, again, thank you so much for this one. Thanks, Angela. Absolutely amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And wishing everybody to have a lovely, lovely evening. Looking at what's in their fridge. And starving themselves for 5 hours between meals. This is something I fall down on, Leyla. So yeah, it's a big one, huge one. It's probably why long cycle rides are really good for me, because you can't. Yeah, and it's basically you know, what intermittent fasting is doing. People call it intermittent fasting, but it's actually, I would call it switching on your migrating motor complex 3 times a day. Do you know, Leyla, that's totally what I was thinking when you were saying that. It was totally that. I go, is that really what intermittent fasting is doing, and why it's the real reason why it is so healthy and helpful for people? And it's much better to have a big breakfast that will keep you going for 5 hours than to have, a lot of people, they have you know, a very mild breakfast. They might have, like, you know, an egg and a toast or something, and of course they're going to be hungry later. So have a really good breakfast, like really go for it with breakfast, so that you can get that 5 hours between. And if you're finding that you're hungry very soon after breakfast, add protein if you're not eating protein, and if that's not enough, add an oil, because an oil keeps food in your stomach for longer, and then you'll be hungry later. So add olive oil, flaxseed oil, linseed oil, your favorite oil, real butter, whatever your favorite oil is, add it to your breakfast and you'll last longer. Wonderful. Wonderful. Ask me another time to show you my favorite breakfast before. Come on, Rosemary, what's your breakfast? Well, my favorite, Sally Spoda says, nice love that. Well, I call it like a paleo pancake. I learnt it from somewhere, and it's like a couple of eggs, oatmeal, banana and all berries in a mixed all together in a frying pan, so with some oil. Lovely. And then essentially under the grill, so it cooks the other side like a Spanish omelette, except it's more of a pancake. And in fact, to be honest, it's more like cake. And you have one of those, you are totally full. You are totally full for a very long time, and it's delicious. That's the secret. Yeah, that's the secret. So don't grab a toast and run out of the house and eat your toast while you're driving to work, which a lot of busy people do. Yeah, and then you know, have 3 or 4 coffees, because that's not giving you appropriate energy. You know, It's because we prioritize everything but ourselves.
Yeah.
And we prioritize everything but ourselves. So take the time and make yourself a nice breakfast, give yourself that love first thing in the morning, and you should be fine for the rest of the day.
Angela's just said, can I have the recipe, please? Yeah, Angela, yeah, I'll send you the recipe. You're right, it absolutely, everything comes down to self-care and self-value, and you are worth it. And you are worth it. You are definitely worth it, Leyla. And on that note, I am going to say finally, thank you so much for everyone who's come tonight. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and see you again for our next webinar.
Thanks, Rosemary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.